Ladies and gentle people, welcome to episode 64 of Discourse in Magic with Jeff Hinchliffe. Now this is I think a really interesting episode. Jeff had a huge role in the development of my magic as well as the development of Tyler's magic in our growing up in Toronto. And then a few years ago, Jeff stopped doing magic, and it had a very large impact, I know, on us as well as other people in Toronto, and we're very excited to have Jeff back to magic. But that's exactly what we spoke about in this episode. We spoke about, first of all, what that absence was about, and of course how you might relate to that. Right, maybe you've fallen out of love with magic, so we sort of found a way that we can resonate with that, as well as we dove into a little bit more background into Toronto magic and some things like that. So I really hope you like this episode. I know that I enjoyed it. Here it is, episode 64 with Jeff Hinchliffe.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Tyler.
My name is Jonah.
And we are here with a good friend of ours, and we mean it this time. Known this guy for a long time. Very excited to have him not only on the podcast, but back in Magic, the one and only Jeff Hinchliffe. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure.
Really excited to have you on, and really excited to talk.
Did I pronounce your last name right?
Yep.
Oh, thank God.
Nailed it.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Very excited to talk with another Toronto Magic face. One of the things about this podcast, which was totally unintentional, but is it's sort of been a little bit of a peek for non-Toronto magicians into the world of what's been going on here. So I'm always excited when I have the opportunity to bring someone on who's been a part of this whole thing that I grew up in Toronto.
Right.
Because, I mean, every city has their own magic thing.
Yep.
And it's very cool that we're able to take a peek into it. So, I guess with that, we'll start how we start all the episodes, which is how did you get into magic?
Okay, so I'm 12 years old. I'm at Canada's Wonderland, which is, as you guys know, an amusement park just north of Toronto. And it's August. It's extremely hot. And I go into one of the souvenir shops just to cool off, just because I know it's air conditioned in there. I walk in and I see a crowd of people, and I get kind of nosy because I hear some noise, and I go over to see what's going on. And there's a guy, and he's got a deck of cards, and he's doing a trick. He spreads the cards down and says, "Reach in, take one." I take one, and as I'm looking at it, he says, "Don't forget the 9 of spades." And I look at it, and it's the 9 of spades. He puts it back on the deck. He has me knock on the cards. I turn over the top card. It's the 9 of spades. Then he takes the deck. He turns it face up. He spreads the cards. They're all 9 of spades. Then he picks them up. He spreads them again. They're all different. And I freak out. He's selling these cards. They're $10. I have $10 for lunch. I buy this deck of cards. No lunch.
Welcome to being a young magician.
Yep.
You learned the lesson day one.
Yep. Yeah, starving artist.
Yeah.
A starving artist from day one.
Yeah.
12 years old. All right.
Yeah, so it was a Svengali pack, obviously. Mm-hmm. And you get a little wooden nickel when you buy a trick at this little counter in the souvenir shop. And it's for a magic shop in Toronto. You take it in and you redeem your free magic prize. And it was the Browser's Den of Magic. So I get this wooden nickel. I get on the bus one day. I go down to Bathurst and Eglinton, and I walk into this shop. And for me, the first time I walked into a magic shop, it's like walking into an antique or knick-knack store in a foreign country. Like, everything looks unfamiliar. You don't know what any of it is, but it all looks interesting. Like, there's something about it's like, this is weird, but yeah. And so I take my wooden nickel in, I get my little magic book, and that was it. Once I went into the shop, there was a table, a couple of guys doing tricks. I sat down, they showed me stuff. I got my free little magic trick. I went home, started going back, and I was, the bug bit me hard.
Yeah. And
That was an eerily familiar feeling
That's exactly what I was going to say. That was a really that story brought up a lot in me, and I also think that it's cool to have a story where the hook really is the magic shop. You know, a few people, you know, we hear uncles, we hear magic sets, you know, we hear, you really went to the root, found the root of found the root of it very early. And then sort of how did magic unfold for you? Where did you find yourself and how did you...
So once I started to take it seriously, you know, I was going to the magic shop every Saturday. I was there from pretty much when the store opened to when the store closed. In the summer, I was there 3 days a week for almost the whole day. I was practicing all the time. Like I saw a guy, like I was into a little bit of everything, like most people are. You walk in and every trick that seems kind of cool, you buy it. I had a zombie ball, I had dove pans, I had lethal tender, I had all kinds of, you know, I had a hopping half set, I
lost that at Magic Camp. I broke my heart anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, you know, I had all the, you know, you have sort of a potpourri. Everything is kind of cool. And then you eventually settle into what really grabs you, what really intrigues you, what really gets your motor going. And I saw this guy, Pony Chang, who's no longer doing magic, unfortunately, but he did beautiful work. He did an ace assembly. And when he finished, it was Hitchcock's Aces by Darwin Ortiz with the transposition kicker between the aces going, right? And so he does it, and I say, that's a really cool trick. How much does that cost? And he says, oh, no, you don't buy that trick. These are regular cards. You read it in this book. It's all sleight of hand. And that's when I was like, ooh, sleight of hand. Cool. Yeah. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to do that. You know, and that was when I decided to really work on sleight of hand and try and develop card magic in particular, sleight of hand in general, but specifically card magic. You know, I do a little bit with coins. You know, I do sort of the classics. I don't do a lot of modern stuff. I don't do JW grip. Or I don't even really do much edge grip. Mostly cards.
That's good. And I mean, I was a mostly card person for a big chunk of my world. I mean, it's 90% of what I do. Aside from now, I'm sort of really jumping into the stage world. But I feel you, and it's funny enough, one of the tricks that you created is one of my favorite tricks ever, which is the Deja Vu.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just one of my favorite tricks absolutely ever. It's just absolutely fantastic. So it's that was really, really cool. And it's funny the way that you described that story.
It's a very familiar progression.
100%.
Yeah. I think a lot of magicians' lives.
Yeah, I have this idea about magic for magicians who actually are able to be like, I'm a magician. Anybody who's able to say that, there's two moments. There's the moment that you got into magic, and there's the moment that kept you into magic.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. It's something that I feel. It's sort of been discovering itself. So it's funny to hear, you know, that one of the crazy things in magic is that there are moments which are impossible moments, but somehow they're more impossible than other moments, and they propel us back into magic. You know what I mean? So I thought that was a really interesting way for you to mention the switch into card magic.
Right.
Then you ended up working at the store, is that right?
Yeah, so I've been doing magic for, several years at that point. I started doing restaurants when I was 16. I got a restaurant, Red Lobster. And I was very fortunate because that Red Lobster had me 3 nights a week.
Wow.
3 hours Friday, 3.5 hours Saturday, 3 hours Sunday.
Wow.
Right? So it was 9.5 hours of restaurant work every week from when I was 16 to when I was 19 for just over 3 years. Right? So that, I'm very fortunate because that gave me a real opportunity to work on a regular basis in front of people, to try out material, to figure out what worked for me, what didn't work for me, what I needed to tweak on this or that to get it working better, whether it's getting a better reaction or getting the timing right. Experience is the best teacher, and I was very fortunate that during my formative years when I had a lot of free time to work on magic, I also had a lot of opportunity to work.
Right.
But eventually, as I was graduating university, I got an opportunity to work at Browsers at the shop. And I took it. And then I was there for a few years. And then the recession happened. And things got tight. And I left the magic shop. And I pretty much left magic.
So let's dive into that. Because I think that before we get into it, this was something that Tyler brought up, which I'd love for him to expand on even before we dive into it. But, that like any interest or any hobby or passion or project or, there's lulls. And I think that this might be a really good example of a lull that, interesting enough, like affected the Magic community. You not being a part of it for a few years. But before we talk about that, I just want to talk about the fact that sort of we all have lulls in Magic. So Tyler, have you experienced lulls in Magic? Sort of, how does that go for you? Because I know that that's something that you struggle with a lot, and I feel like this is a really good...
I go through lulls on a weekly basis. I fucking hate Magic for breakfast and then fall in love by dinner. It's like... I don't know. There was years where people would ask me to perform and I'd be like, that's not me. Stop requesting that. I'm done. I don't like to do it. But I would still practice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There was still moments where I'd pick up a deck of
there was
cards.
years where you jammed but never ever performed.
No, I just was not down. And I thought, it's just going to be a hobby. I don't know what it was. It could have just been me at the time. Being in relationships, I think, actually affects me a lot magically. At least it did. Because...
Yeah, I can see that.
I just love the way you said the word magically.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that.
If you don't have an extremely supportive partner, and I mean supportive about your art, it can be really hard to motivate yourself. I had a few partners that didn't like who I was when I was performing. My stage presence, they're like, that's not you, it's fake, da da da. And that sort of rocked me a bit. But I don't know that that's what it was entirely. And I don't even know what it is that brought me back. I think it's when I just get to hang out with the people. Honestly, Ben Train reached out to me at one point and said, let's hang out. And I was like, oh cool, I'm friends with Ben Train now. That's kind of badass. And then he started showing me some stuff and I started getting ideas and the fire just got started again. You know what I mean? The community kept me going a lot of time. Magic camp, I would never say no to going to Magic camp. When I got that email, I was like, oh yeah, I'm in. I'm in for sure, no matter what. And then if you can't not go there and love Magic, it's the best 100%. Time. You know what
Funnily enough, you mentioned Ben as what brought you back. And you also mentioned going from having a lot of props to sort of loving a deck of cards. Those stories sort of came together for me, which is I was doing a lot of tricks, and then one summer I was up, I'm sure I've told the story on the podcast of when I met Ben, at least on his episode, but one summer I was up at Camp Ramah, and he was working as the tuck shop guy there. So he would just give candy to kids every day. He just sat in a hot room giving candy to kids. So he found out that I did magic. It's so funny for that to be Ben Train's job. Anyways, he found out that I did magic, and he told me we would meet at 10, and then he arrived around 11:45, and we jammed, and it was the same thing. He was doing all this really cool magic with a regular deck of bicycle cards, and what I had with me was a deck of bridge-sized cards with dandelions on them, or some other flower on them, because that was the one thing that I brought with me to my overnight camp, because I so didn't give a shit about magic. I just so didn't care at that point that I was like, I'll bring a pack of dollar store cards. Maybe it'll be to play games. Maybe it'll be to do magic. Who cares? I didn't bring anything else. And it was after that which sort of dove me back in and dove me into books and card mat and not buying sort of the disposable trick almost and buying and sort of learning with books and things like that. So it's funny that all of those things sort of come together, how you switch sort of by being wowed, and I also switched by being wowed, but I think about that moment as if in the next year or 2 or 3 in that time, if no one wowed the crap out of me, I could easily have not been in Magic. So it's funny that we have that ingrained in magic, like a good fooling.
Yeah.
You get a good fooling every once in a while.
And I think I kind of resented the idea of having the identity of a magician. Like, I never wanted it to be a job at all until very recently. Like, it just sounded like that's so not me. Like, maybe something I could do on the side, but definitely not like my whole identity, until I saw Ozzy win. And then I was like, well, if I could do that, you know what I mean? Like, if I could make people feel like that, not just do, like, hokey things. And then I was inspired again. And then, like, I started falling in love with other sort of performers and being like, okay, there's a lot of this that I actually really, really respect. And I don't know. It's interesting that, there's always sort of like an idol that sort of you strive.
Pushes you back in.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how and why you left magic. I think that it's something that people at home have struggled with. I know that we've people of all different ages, and not everyone has, between the moment when they got into magic and when they are now, it has been a clear upward climb. It's been a roller coaster for a lot of people, and I think that they would really resonate with some of the reasons why you left, and of course some of the reasons why you're back.
Okay. Magic, when you fall in love with magic, I think, you're probably going to be in love with it to some extent for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Like, when you really get into it and you study it and it becomes a part of you. My best friend, who's also my roommate, he says, the way I handle anything, he says, it's just magical. He says, when you pick up the remote to change the channel, there's just this, he says, it's not showboaty. There's just a certain flair inherent in the way you move. He says, it's magical. So I think when you really fall in love with it, when you're passionate about it, you can fall out of love, but I don't think it's forever. Because, I got bit hard. Every birthday gift, every Christmas gift was either magic or money so that I could buy magic. Mm-hmm. I was at the magic shop all the time. I was doing magic in restaurants. I was doing birthday parties. I was wearing a suit and tie. I was dressing formally more often than I wasn't. Mm-hmm. As a teenager. I was into it for 15, 16 years, really heavy, and was starting to work and was making some money, but I'm an artist, not a businessman. That's one of my biggest flaws, right? And that's the reasons for that are a whole separate issue. But I'm just not. My personality does not present itself to be good for business in terms of me running my own business. I'm not. That's not where my strengths lie.
Yeah.
My strengths lie as a performer, doing the magic,
I
creating the
resonate with
magic.
that a lot.
That's where my strength is. I would need a manager because I was making money doing magic, but I wasn't making money doing the kind of magic I wanted to do. Right? So it was a combination of factors that really made me give it up. I wasn't making the kind of money I wanted to make. I wasn't even making that money doing the kind of magic I wanted to do. I had been working at the shop, and I knew that was going to come to an end because of the recession. It was just not economically feasible. So I got burnt out. And there were some personal things going on in my life as well that I'm sure played a role. But it kind of reached a boiling point, a tipping point, and I said
everything was.
I said, you know what? It's time to get a haircut and get a real job, and that's what I did. Yeah. And I sold a lot of my magic, a good chunk of my props, a good chunk of my books, some of which I regret selling. Most I really don't. Because I read those books and I got what I needed from them and I enjoyed them, but I'm not. They will be better served sitting on someone else's shelf, not mine. But there are some books, there's always some regrets. Yeah.
I've auctioned some shit where I'm like, Yeah, I could have used that.
Yep.
They don't make that anymore.
Yep. Yeah, there's things you think will be around forever. There's not a lot in Magic that's around forever.
No.
Or that's as well made as it used to be.
Yeah. So sort of that's what it takes to fall out of it. And then what brought you back?
Well, I think I knew as much as in the last 5 years, I really worked on very little Magic. I don't even think I touched a deck of cards once a week. I still had decks of cards sitting everywhere. They were out. There was 4 or 5 decks of cards that were just out in the open. But I maybe once a week I would pick up a deck, and I would pick it up for 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and then it would go back on the shelf or back on the table. And in the 5 years that I was out, I did 2 shows. One was a company Christmas party, and one was a wedding for a guy that I worked with as a favor, because he was a really nice guy, and I said I was more than happy to do it. And that was it. I went to a couple of lectures. I went to a Michael Weber lecture, because when Michael Weber's in town, you go and see the Michael Weber lecture, because it's always good. It's inspiring. It's thoughtful. Go if he's ever in your city.
Even if you don't like Magic,
just do it. You'll thank us later. But I think I always knew that I was going to come back at some point. Like, I always felt like I have no interest in doing Magic now, but I'm probably going to have an interest in doing it again at some point. Which is why I didn't get rid of everything. There was things that I kept. And people I worked with would ask me about Magic, because America's Got Talent would start to have a lot of magicians, and Penn and Teller's fool us, and
One more thing to thank him for. You got Jeff back.
So, and then I started to hang out with magicians a little bit more. I started calling people up, and people started inviting me out to certain things. And then I got the opportunity to come back to the shop, which meant that I got to work at the store, which I love, because Jeff, it's not a store, it's a community. Like it feels like a family. Like it's like Cheers, but without the alcohol.
Exactly.
Everybody knows your name. It's something special. So when I got the opportunity to come back to the shop, I looked at the real world and I said, this is all right, but Magic Shop is pretty fun. Yeah. And I decided, I thought about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I weighed my options, and I said, this is the right time. This feels right. And so coming back to the shop immediately sort of pulls me back in. Fortunately, I'm not all that rusty. It doesn't feel like I'm all that rusty. There's definitely tricks that I don't remember, because they were steppy and procedural, and I haven't done the steps or procedure in 4 or 5 years. So, but technique wise, I feel like I didn't lose too much. I definitely had to put a little bit of work in to get back up to speed, but I was fortunate that I felt it was a pretty smooth transition back in.
That's great, and I also think one of the things that I see from this is that it's an opportunity to do Magic without having to sort of like fight day in and day out, tooth and nail for the business aspect of it, and fight, because like it's not like selling. You don't have to go sell yourself as a gig working in a Magic store, so it's a much easier. You know what I mean? Like, it's an environment where you can, obviously there's sales and there's business and there's things of that sort. But it's an ability to be in Magic without, performing all the time immediately.
Right.
Immediately at the get.
Well, it's a different type of being in Magic.
Exactly.
Because I'm not a performer.
You're being in the family.
I'm a demonstrator salesman.
Right.
helping performers and hobbyists.
Yeah.
Right? It's it's a different dynamic with the community. I mean, the magic shop is also a hub in a lot of ways. Just by the nature of magic is a niche market, there's not a lot of magic shops out there. So they naturally tend to be
Hubbish.
epicenters of
exactly.
the magic community, of where magicians hang out, meet and greet, and
and now it's I mean the Browser's Den. I'm always excited when it comes up in this. It's more towards your point of it being a hub and more towards, I think, the amount of the effect that it's had on magicians in this city. I think there's such positivity around the Toronto magic scene that we're very lucky to be a part of it.
Well, yeah, the magic scene here is great. Toronto, and historically we've been a big magic city. Like you got Sid Lorraine, P. Howard Lyons with Ibidem, Norm Houghton, Jay Sankey, Gary Kurtz came from Toronto. He was a Browser's Den kid. Yeah,
it's crazy.
So let's talk Sorcerer's Safari. We just mentioned it being big,
right?
So I would assume of the large Toronto things that had an effect on your magic, Browser's Den was obviously one of them for me, and you and Tyler, and Sorcerer's Safari I know was one of them for definitely Tyler and I.
Oh, for me too.
So I was going to ask, what was your experience with Sorcerer's Safari in terms of yourself and your magic?
Okay, so for Sorcerers, I never went to Sorcerer's Safari as a camper. My first time coming to Sorcerer's Safari was 2003. And I came up because I was working with Mike during the summer, and he offered for me to come up to camp. And he said, yeah, you can just come up and be like an extra set of hands, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, cool, thank you, that's awesome. So I came up, and it was magic camp. It was it was the first year at White Pine, right? So it was Aaron Fisher's first year. And I clicked with Fisher right away. Like, him and I just got along. I showed him a couple of things that he liked, and so that was cool. And and now I've gone to visit Fisher in California years ago. I flew out to visit him for a week. He's awesome. And there's so many people that you meet at camp and you become friends with, and a friendship which has transcended magic, right? Like, I'm not magic friends with Aaron Fisher.
Right.
I'm friends with Aaron Fisher.
100%.
Right? Like, it's, and that was because of magic camp. 100%.
One of the things for me is when I went there, everyone else was a magician. And that was the first time that ever happened for me. And that was what it reminded me always. So for a lot of people, that camp, I'm assuming after that year you went basically every year.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, minus the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went for, I think it was 10 years straight.
Yeah. So what did it mean to you outside of having magic mentors?
Camp helped me as a performer in a way. They helped me a little bit on stage. It gave me some more performing experience on a big stage, because I'm primarily a close-up guy. So from that perspective, it was kind of nice. But really, Magic Camp really prepared me to be a better teacher. Camp really helped me understand how to better teach magic, and how to teach magic in a way that the people that you're teaching appreciate what it is, and how it's done, and how it's done properly to be done well. And I'd say more than a performer, Magic Camp really taught me how to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the things I think that's so true about math and magic is that they're both so based in teaching. They're so
in terms of how you can understand it.
Yeah, just in terms of anybody who is growing in those fields. I guess it's for everything, but I mean
communication skills are you can be good at something, But if you're not good at communicating it to others, the fact that you're good at it is only good for you. Like, you shouldn't be teaching it. Because if you can't convey the information in a way that's palatable to your students, then it's a wasted effort.
That's why not necessarily all coaches are people who have done the things before. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
The skills that it takes to coach someone are not necessarily the skills that it takes to, let's say, lift 500 pounds above your head.
There are a great many more scientists than there are great science communicators.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
There's a handful of really good science communicators. There's hundreds, thousands of great scientists.
So, if there's somebody out there listening to this and maybe they are falling out of love with magic, what would you say to them to either keep them back in, or you can very well tell them to have their break if they want? You know, what would you say to that person, given how you're back?
Given my experience, I mean, but I definitely think it's not a one size fits all.
Of course,
right? So they're going to have to base it around their experience with magic. But I would say, take the time that you think you need. If it feels right, do it. If it doesn't feel right, I think if you really fall in love with it, you will come back to it at some point. But I could be wrong. I think that's true for me. I don't necessarily think that has to be true for everyone.
Yeah.
But I would say...
I would agree.
Don't come back just because, I was in love with it, so I have to come back, right? No, maybe you truly fell out of love with it, and, maybe it was a phase or a fad. It was just one that lasted a while and burned really hot, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to be eternal.
Yeah, and
it's like every relationship, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's true. It's true.
It's totally true.
I guess you can think about it. It's like everyone's into magic until they're not into magic.
Yeah,
right. Like,
this is a
you
very
either stop being into
episode
magic or you die.
time.
Yeah, that's a.
I have a question that's super left field, like tangential, not even a little bit even. Like it's so far away from being a tangent.
I can edit out if it sucks, so no problem. Go
ahead. I don't know. We never really talked about anything this specific, I think. You love oil and water.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Why? Vinaigrette dressing. It's fantastic.
That's just...
That's a great question.
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you why. I mean, I know it. A lot of magicians hate it.
That's why I'm asking.
A lot of magicians hate it. Now, I'm not quite sure why a lot of magicians hate it. I think some of them hate it just because there's so many different versions out there. And more specifically, I think there's so many versions out there that just aren't very good. I think it can be a very magical plot. It's simple to understand. It's easy to follow. Like, the effect follows Vernon's advice of they should be able to describe it in a sentence or two, right? Like, it should be simple to understand and convey, right? Red cards and black cards are mixed together and they just separated. Now, what I think makes an oil and water routine effective is that the method is clear and consistent, right? I think it's the repetition and the increase in deceptiveness that happens with each phase. And it doesn't have to be big, but there needs to be something about the next phase that is a little bit cleaner than the phase that came before it.
Without being different in mechanic.
Yes.
Yeah. It's clear and procedural, and you're closing the doors as you go.
I feel that for an oil and water routine, and this is my philosophy of what makes an oil and water routine great, and there are some great ones out there. All of your counts or displays of the packets need to be consistent looking. Especially if it's multiple phases and each time you're showing the cards in a different way. Mm-hmm. To me, that starts to feel like, okay, I don't know how, but the cards are being manipulated.
Right.
Right? He's manipulating the cards. Whereas if you show the cards this way and that way, and it's consistent throughout, it doesn't feel like the cards are being manipulated if the displays in and of themselves look fair. That, to me, is a problem with a lot of oil and water routines. But yeah, no, I think the routine is very magical. It's simple. It's visual, although it's not visual in that it's like a color change, but it's not strictly a conceptual trick. It's not like a think of a card trick. It's not like mentalism where really it's happening in their head. There is something physical happening to the deck.
You can see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a beginning, middle, and end. There's chaos. There's a lot of good tools.
Yeah. It's maybe a lot of people feel that it's a corny metaphor. The red cards are water and the black cards are oil, and oil rises to the top. Okay, maybe it is corny, but it's people understand it, right? It's a
you can visualize.
It's a perfectly usable visual aid, right? It's perfectly apt. It fits. And if you do some sort of a full deck separation climax, right? I mean that also makes sense. That's it. First, yeah, it's logical. Right, and it allows the routine to be progressive, right? We've been mixing this small packet of cards, and within a few moments it separates. But if that happens, then what happens to this entire deck as it's sitting here the whole time? Well, maybe it takes several moments, but
they figure it out.
Yeah, and they kind of catch on as you're showing the cards, like no way, and it's killer.
One of my favorite moments in all of Magic is like I feel that as much as possible, you should let them go. No. Let them have, you just want to beat them by 1 second after that. You don't want to stress it, but you want them to go, no, I swear, their mind, I swear to goddamn God, if that's that, if that's that logical thing that I think that it must be,
right?
My goodness, right? And they know it's going to be, and I think that's such a great moment, and I think it's good that you mentioned the full deck separation part, because it's sort of that time where you get to be
anticipation is powerful.
Bingo.
Anticipation is very powerful.
There's nothing better than when you know what the end of your trick is, and then someone says, "If he does exactly that, I'm gonna freak out." And then you're like, "Oh, whoa, okay. Now I'm just gonna sit here. I'm just gonna let you just bask in whatever you're feeling right now because I know I'm gonna fuck you up."
So we're getting close to the end of the episode, and there used to be 2, now 3 things that we do when we wrap up the episode. So the first thing is I want to start an endless chain. I guess it won't be an endless chain. It'll just be... Or there'll be different chains, whatever. A chain of magician recommendations. So somebody who you know...
Okay.
Who has not yet been on the podcast, who you think should be on the podcast, to talk about something special that they do in Magic, who would you recommend? The caveat is you need to be able to give us their contact information. You can't be like, tell her!
Have you guys talked to Jason Dean? You remember Jason?
I do remember him. We haven't spoken to him.
We interact on Facebook quite a bit.
Yeah?
We should,
Yeah, he'd be a cool guy to talk to, because Jason's got some stories because he used to be the magician that toured with the rock bands. Now he's in a rock band, and his rock band is doing quite well. Yeah. So I don't know if you can get him. I think he'd be a cool guy to talk to. Because he'll have some interesting stories. He's got a hell of a story, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be interesting. It's been many years since I've seen that guy in person. I'd love to bring him on the podcast. That's a very cool number 3. Do you want to do number 2? Up 3, 2, 1 of the things.
Okay. All right. It's happening, guys. 3, 2, he finally is letting me go first.
Letting you go first
for the first time.
I can show you how it's not that hard.
Oh God. Okay. What do we say? What do you say? All right. So one of the second thing that we do when we're wrapping things up now is we go one by one and mention something from the podcast that any one of us has said that we think is particularly valuable. Jonah usually goes first, but I get to go first this time, and this one I was just too sort of engulfed to prepare, so this was a bad time. No, I really liked how, I don't know, something that just really resonated with me was how your story was so familiar that it had me on edge. Like when you described walking in and the feeling of that store, like the weird antique-y vibe, and you're like, this is my weird hobby that I'm into now. Right. You know what I mean? You're just sort of looking around and curious and confused. That was, and multiple points, being really blown away by sleight of hand and like completely ditching gimmicks for a while, being like, I'm going to be a purist. And then now, for me, I've switched back into like, I'm going to use everything, to just best serve the purpose. But anyway, Jonah, how about you?
For me, I think one of the things is just fun to reflect on sort of Toronto and all the things that it has gifted us, and how we can each be able to say how certain things were iconic, like the Magic Store, like Magic Camp. And then even outside of Toronto, us talking about things like, one moment with a magician that changes our world. Whether it's the first moment that gets us into magic, or a moment that changes us from doing some type of magic to another type of magic, or something that maybe zaps us back in, or anything like that. To me, I think that that's so cool, because we already fool each other. I mean, I assume in other niches or hobbies, you might, if you love singing, you might see a really amazing singer and be affected by it. But there's something cool about the fact that you're like fooled, like you're really affected by it, because it's something that's impossible to you, as well as being so profound and amazing. So to me, that was a really fun thing to uncover. And what about you? And what from the episode that someone's mentioned is you think valuable take home point?
For me, like thinking about it, is the value that came from Magic Camp, man. Like the more I think about it, like look, the three of us are here in a large part because of Magic Camp.
Oh, not a large part. No. Entirely
because of Magic Camp, right? Like I said, I'm friends with Fisher because of Magic Camp. I'm friends with Lee Asher because of Magic Camp. I mentioned Jason Dean to you guys because of Magic Camp, right? Have you guys had Keith Brown on the show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Keith Brown from Magic Camp, and now he's doing fringe shows all over the place. Just yesterday in the shop, Nathaniel Rankin came in.
Yeah.
Right? And picked up some stuff because he's going to work a cruise ship.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's unbelievable to me. Neil Croswell.
Yeah.
Right? And another guy, he's doing shows all over the world.
I think it really exemplifies the importance of like community hubs. We had a whole month about talking about communities and stuff like that, but I mean, Browser's Den, such a hub, and Magic Camp, such a hub. An ability for young people to grow with experts in magic alongside experts is just
and share a passion that really forms a strong connection.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think, sorry if this goes on a little long, but
I
I think one of the beautiful things about magic, and one of the things that made Magic Camp so special, okay, compared to, let's say, sports camp, is this. Because magic is such a small world, it's such a niche market, the top dogs, the big names, the real deals are accessible.
Yep.
Right? You're at sports camp. You
Crosby's
might get a Blue Jay at baseball camp or a former Blue Jay to come up for an afternoon. Yeah. Maybe stay the day. Right? At Magic Camp, you got to spend a week with Michael Amar.
And he came to your cabin at night to hang out.
Yeah, and he came and he hung out and he fooled the crap out of you. Right? And taught you the coolest stuff. That
was my first year of Magic Camp.
It was the fact that the experts are so accessible because it's such a small world. It really allows for there to be a community that gets it, that appreciates it, that understands it. And Toronto's got a really good magic scene. It really does.
Yeah, and it's there's only things growing, and it's cool that this podcast gets to be a front row seat to this chunk of time. The growth and the existence of a Toronto community in this chunk of time.
Right.
And it's something that I keep thinking about, sort of the lens, that hopefully somebody who's listening to this podcast learns a lot, maybe a lot about performing, a lot about business, a lot about working, a lot about tons of different areas. And one of the things that they might learn about is the really, really cool magic going on in Toronto and all the fun things that we're doing here. So I don't know, something about that just keeps coming back to me, and I think that it's really, really cool. And the last thing...
Can I do it?
You can do it.
I love this inverse. Let's never do it again, though. I'm happy to be number 2, but I'm going to keep complaining about it. The final thing we do on this podcast, there's a microphone, and it's recording, and we're going to put it on a website where at least at Wasim Magic is listening. So if there's anything you want to say to any magicians, could be a plug for something, which I doubt you're going to do, but any message, doesn't have to be from this podcast. Anything you want at all, got to get it off your chest.
You want to reach magicians, what do you want to tell them?
All right. I've said this before to some people. I said this in a lecture. Magic is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Right? Some people work on magic because they like to work on moves. They're move monkeys. They like to work on technique. And as long as they're not claiming to be performers and they just enjoy working on technique, let them work on technique. Who cares? Let them be happy. It's not bothering you. It's only bothering you because you let it bother you, right? If they want to be a move monkey, let them be a move monkey. There are some people that are into magic because they just love the intellectual nature of thinking about how these things work. You know, it's an engineering puzzle to them. It's the structure of it. It's the cleverness of it that they enjoy. But maybe they're no good at performing. As long as they don't claim to be a great performer, who cares? Let them enjoy it. Like, what does it matter? And if you're a performer and that's what you want to do, right, great, do it. You know, like there are many different aspects from which someone approaches magic. Mm-hmm. There's no one right way to be a magician. You know, and I think if more people understood that, you wouldn't have things being quite so cliquey sometimes, or campy, or, and I mean campy as in camp-like, right? Yeah. Yeah, you know, like magic is a multifaceted thing, and it's a lot of things to a lot of people, and they're all beautiful in their own way. And we all have a love for this. And I think we should remember that.
I think that's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful way to end. Big, huge thank you for joining us on this episode.
Thank you, guys.
Really, really fantastic to have you and to reminisce on some fun times and learn a little bit about what brought you into magic both times.
Thank you, guys.
And of course, thank you to everyone at home for tuning into this episode. Of course, your ears mean the world to us. We'll see you next week.
Take care.
Boom, there you have it, episode 64. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. I hope you don't quit magic. And I'm really glad that you get another little peek about what it's like to be in Toronto. So once again, if you like the episode or if you like anything about Discourse and Magic, now's the time. Share it with someone, tell someone, call a friend, use a lifeline. Is that your final answer? Whatever, all the stuff. But do whatever you can to spread the word, because that's how we stay alive. Thanks so much. See you Thursday.